Hey, it's James, and welcome back to the Inversiverse, episode 12, The Spell of the Mind, Language Illusion and the Physiology of Thought, where reality bends, narratives unravel, and the unseen becomes visible. Today we dive deep beneath the surface of the mind into psychological architecture of what we call mental health, the moment-by-moment interactions between our brain and body, and how language itself may be the oldest form of magic, casting spells that liberate or bind us, spells which control our reality and open us potentially to manipulative abuse and living within tyrannical states of being, or states of mind which allow us to live in emotional peace and enhanced well-being. How to spot liars and manipulators. As a result of becoming more self-aware, the magic lies within identifying how you're being made to feel, discerning your feelings and those of others, and how to protect yourself from such entities, individuals, corporations, or governments. Let's begin by asking, what if our suffering is not always pathology, but prophecy? What if mental health isn't just a condition, but a conversation between our biology, beliefs, and the stories we're told? So let's start with section 1, the psychology of mental health, a shift in spectrum. Mental health is not static, it's dynamic, contextual, and deeply influenced by language and environment. It reflects the constant interaction between personal experience, societal expectation, and internal narrative. Diagnostic labels like depression, anxiety, or personality disorders often reduce complexity to categories. It means through language to allow others to diminish importance, simplifying what is often a complex response to a dysregulated society. These categories can be useful, but they also risk becoming cages. They are intentionally used to bind people to labels that identify with or as, rather than just being who you are. Oh, you're autistic. So I dismiss what you're saying anyway. You think it's strange, you're stupid, or you're crazy. It's an excuse for people to mistreat others, then excuse is acceptable. The manipulators of the world love to create new linguistic labels for folks to identify with or as it adds another contextual layer of ego within the mind, for them to fight and defend when triggered or force alignment. They use it to divide people and keep them divided through ignorance and arrogance. We don't need labels to identify with or as, we can just be. We don't have to force others into alignment to get on. We never have to discuss political beliefs, religious beliefs, just be. We're being conditioned to talk about such subjects intentionally. We are manipulated day in day out through social media, the press, and the mainstream media. They are called talking points for a reason, because they want to induce you to waste your energy, talking about systems which are not of benefit to anybody. The world is going to pot, through collaboration of evil perpetrators intent on causing pain, suffering, and disharmony. Democratic or Republic, Labour or Conservative is just a means for them to divide. They are labels for ideological control. They don't care who you vote for because they collaborate in a pantomime illusion. Neither party represents the people, so why allow them to destroy our friendships, our families? Neither matter. And nor does you fighting for them mean anything. At a cost to your ego, maybe? Do you defend and fight? It's okay to be humble. We must ask, are we pathologizing natural reactions to unnatural environments? What does it mean to be well in a system that is emotionally, economically, or spiritually unwell? Rather than see mental illness as dysfunction, what if we understood it as a signal of dissonance between our inner truths and our outer truth? Between our intuition and the cultural scripts we are expected to perform? Mental distress may emerge when a person is forced to deny their true needs, ignore internal warnings, or conform to roles that betray their authenticity. That does not mean someone is permanently mentally unwell. These are conditional states that change with the feeling of security, and the world no longer cares to provide security, sympathy, or empathy. It's intent on making people feel insecure, to put fear into them, and pressures of life, increasing with every day that passes, they are intentionally destroying people's nervous systems, then labeling it as those mentally unwell or unstable people. They do not account or allow for people to openly express their emotions, be unique individuals. They are suppressing our uniqueness into blind obedience, of having a hive mind, to all think alike, to conform as told, so that they can discredit and diminish people in distress as somehow unwell. It's all disgusting behaviour of power and control, layers and layers of psychological conditioning, diminishing the human condition and the human experience. Mental distress can take many forms. It doesn't always appear as obvious breakdowns or clinical symptoms. It can manifest subtly, in a hunched posture, averted eyes, clenched jaw, verbal diatribe, shouting, screaming, or the constant tapping of fingers and bodily stimming. The body begins to carry the weight of unspoken emotions because of the suppression in the world. The voice might become flat in a person, withdrawn or overly cheerful as a mask. People may speak in loops of self-doubt, such as, I don't know what's wrong with me, or I just need to be better. However, many of us know what is wrong. We're now living in avoidance, delusion, and denial, being forced to live how they desire us to live, against our free will, without our consideration. This causes many of the issues and stirs up a plethora of emotions that are immediately and conveniently labelled by them as mental health issues. You're not mental or unwell, you're an oppressed, unshackled slave denied a voice, or an ability to dissent against their evil practices. Living in an open prison that is intentionally making you unwell, then the nasty, evil controllers and oppositions are blaming you for your lack of accepting it. Through cognitive disconnection, you are unable to fully recognise it, logically or critically, and in an irrational mindset. It's all intentional. This is the inflicted mental stunting and impairment of the brain. They create through emotional abuse and continued manipulation, coercion, dominance, and expected submission through their continued oppression and suppression. It's all to subdue you, just accept the pain. You only feel it, and that is part of the deception and how they can continue to get away with it. It's the reason they have to constantly bombard you with fear, because it's the only way to keep the nervous system stimulated negatively through subconscious programming and control. Your immersive experience within their online world, their connection to the internet, is mentally entrapping you further to comply, accept their world as they want it, not to speak up or stand up to the mental bullying. We're being moulded to be inauthentic to our true selves, being given labels to identify with or as previously discussed, diminishing each of us as individuals by evil, nasty control freaks. Do as you're told or be pushed out of society. spoken badly of, discredited with lies and manipulation to create biased views from others, left to rot, left without food or shelter. This pressure bears within every one of us at some point in our lives, therefore it can affect people's behaviours and actions directly, and cause breakdowns, but the lack of awareness enables these nasty, deceptive sociopaths, psychopaths and narcissists to get away with their emotional manipulation. Others may overcompensate, becoming perfectionists, hyperachievers or chronic caretakers, masking internal chaos with external control. Some drift into apathy, others into frantic overthinking. Many simply become emotionally unavailable, not because they don't care, but because they've burned out their capacity to express it. In each case, the distress speaks through behaviour and sometimes irrational displays. The nervous system tries to communicate, something is wrong, I'm not safe, I don't feel seen or heard. The modern mental health paradigm. In the modern era, we treat symptoms rather than addressing the underlying systems, thought processes, or enlightening people to the effects of living under a fascist regime. This is by design, to maintain emotional control and suppress awareness. They aren't going to openly admit we're part of the reason you feel so miserable in life. Your continued obedience to their facades, masks, and persecution systems is complicit. Behave and everything will be okay. Don't say this, don't say that, don't believe this, do believe that. It's a continuous psychological assault, one that induces chronic insecurity, fueling the need to be accepted and validated. But validation must come from within. Stand in integrity, being humble to life's experiences, not living in ego and refusing to conform is not detrimental to community. In fact, it is the antidote to groupthink and hive mind. Independent thought is the true empowerment of humanity, and that is precisely what they must extinguish. These dynamics enable their oppressive systems to function, yet they repeatedly tell you that symptoms of mental health issues may be caused by the environment, diet or hereditary genetics, as if they are not the architects of the macro environment. But they distract you, keep your focus on micro-environment. Focus on this football game, focus on this celebrity, all actions to distract mental energy. Focus and attention. Not paying attention in this life can be extremely costly. The truth is we must zoom out and adopt a systems thinking perspective to see the full picture. But it's a total crock of shit, excuse my language. They are directly responsible for their sustained psychological and socio-political oppression. We must unite and say no more. We must hold them to account and take community responsibility for removing these people from positions that impact our mental and physical well-being. Instead of admitting fault, they do what all narcissists, sociopaths and psychopaths do. They invert the script. They play the victim. It's you're the problem. They use triangulation and subtle linguistic manipulation to convince you that you're defective. This is classic gaslighting. There is no universal definition of normal behaviour. It's a societal and social construct. By comparing your behaviour to an illusion of normativity, they claim authority to decide who is normal and who is not. And if you step out of line, out comes a label again. You're not normal. They make it up. They bag you, they tag you, do as you're told, because we said so. This is how diagnostic labels are weaponized. Over time, with repetition and cultural reinforcement, people begin to believe them. Generations have trusted in those positions of authority without knowing any different, losing the ability to discern manipulation, not because they are weak, but because they are unaware it is even occurring. It's not the living conditions, environmental toxicity or media filth that's the problem. No, it's you. Always you. And they take no accountability while coercing you into conformity. Try speaking out. Watch how quickly the control freaks crawl from the woodwork to drag you back into the hive. Healing must begin with a reconnection to self, to authentic community, and to meaningful experiences. Sanity has become performative, a performance aligned with social compliance rather than actual psychological health. In reality, true health may require breaking from the consensus reality to preserve inner coherence. This is where Stockholm Syndrome comes in, a psychological response where victims of abuse develop emotional bonds with their captors as a survival strategy. Much as the public has been conditioned to find comfort in the presence of systemic abusers, defending them even when faced with clear evidence of harm. Studies like Graham et al. 1995 highlight how trauma bonding occurs not just in isolated cases, but can extend to societal dynamics. Meanwhile, the growing issue of hypochondriasis, or what's now termed illness anxiety disorder from the DSM-5, when society repeatedly tells people they are broken, sick or disordered without addressing systemic root causes, many begin to internalize it. This can create a psychosomatic loop where individuals become hypervigilant to symptoms, convinced that something is wrong when it may not be. For many, nothing is wrong, but the society we live in is broken, and it bleeds onto all of us in some form. This isn't to say all mental distress is imagined, but that much of it is manufactured and socially induced, or worsened by chronic gaslighting and disempowerment from external authorities. Section 2. The brain-body loop, beyond fight, flight, or fawn. Fight, flight, and fawn are not endpoints. They are just early alerts in the body's broader surveillance system. The nervous system constantly scans for cues of safety or threat, even outside our conscious awareness. This process is known as neuroception, a term coined by Dr. Stephen Porges. It refers to the brain's ability to detect safety, danger, or a life threat without conscious thought. From a neurological perspective, neuroception is regulated by the autonomic nervous system, particularly the vagus nerve. It involves brain regions like the amygdala, which provides emotional evaluation, the hippocampus, memory context, and the prefrontal cortex, which provides regulation judgment. These regions collaborate to form a pattern-detecting network, alerting the body whether to remain calm or to activate a defensive state. Neurochemically, responses may include cortisol, a release of the stress hormone when a threat is perceived. Adrenaline prepares muscles for action and movement. Dopamine involved in prediction and alert responses. Oxytocin signals safety, bonding, and trust when cues are positive. Neuroception happens below the threshold of thought, meaning you can be triggered into a stress response before you're even aware of why. A personal experience. An individual I once dated became obsessed with me, and I'm in the process of obtaining a non-molestation restriction of access order through the courts because they persist to this day. I told them that I no longer wanted to see them because I didn't feel comfortable in their presence, did not feel their love was authentic, did not trust them to have the best intentions for me, and their actions of persistence continued and tried to entice me back into being with them. It was not going to happen. Without going into further detail, this individual would turn up at my house, uninvited, persistently call my phone, send text messages in huge numbers day after day, even I'd stated I'd wished for no further contact. They would not accept my no, always trying to plead their case that I should trust them, when they showed me nothing through their words or actions that would enable me to trust them again. I couldn't move forward with them in any capacity. Their previous behaviours towards me included blatant lies, gaslighting, inversion of stories which did not add up, what I perceived as pathological lying, extreme narcissistic traits and behaviour, extreme stubbornness, and for them to just force their way into my life. They could not and would not respect any of my boundaries. They felt entitled to my time and attention even when I refused. They would continue to follow me around, question me persistently, why, please explain. No, I do not need to explain anymore when I have previously explained explicitly the same thing over and over again, and would not be explaining for the 100th time of asking. I am not a perfect person. I have flaws. I have emotions that I work through and process like anyone else. But at times, I would lose my emotional control. When I become upset at a perceived threat, they presented to me as a perceived threat, I become more verbal, the volume of my voice would raise, not intentionally, but through the autonomic trigger that occurs naturally within all of us, through constant pressure or stressful situations. I would inform said individual I would not be changing my mind, that I was feeling unstable and did not want to be in their presence. When this occurs, it takes time for the vagus nerve to become under conscious control once more. Therefore, if I ask you to refrain from particular behaviour, I'm telling you the best I can before I break down. Everyone loses or would lose their temperament under such conditions of unpleasantry, and need to preserve one's own personal safety. If you're constantly being harassed to change your mind, it is like torture. That's the only way I can describe it, like the oppressive conditioning of our governments, manipulators and abusers. This individual would turn up, and just the sight of them would trigger me into a panic. I'd previously been anxious to go out, in case they would turn up. Therefore, their energy, thought of them turning up unannounced, would leave me in a hypervigilant state for days on end, not knowing when or if, which creates mental instability, because the perceived threat remains. I'd verbalise at them to get away, to fuck off even at times when it is extreme, but what they were doing was inducing reactive abuse, using my pain to distort perception of others. To project, oh look at this individual's behaviour, all I wanted to do was talk, etc., etc. I would always stand in my sovereignty and integrity, and what was displayed was a result of the pressure, stress and pain said individual was causing me, and they did not have the understanding or empathy or sympathy to leave me be, except it was over. They had to be selfish, they had to get their point across by being stubborn, egotistical and outright nasty, would continue to say spiteful and nasty things at me, yet they wanted to be in my presence, saying I'm not a good person, I'm not spiritually inclined, because I refused to buckle to their oppressive dominant will. I didn't intend to cause them pain by saying I didn't want to see them again. It's a fact of matter. We did not connect, we began to have less in common, our views and core beliefs didn't match, and I felt things would not move forward because they were immature, not understanding, and I felt I was being used, abused and emotionally manipulated through their words and actions. I just wanted my life back without them in it. On occasion, there have been people nearby in public when they had approached me. If they saw or heard from a distance, they may have seen me raise my arms to keep the individual away from me, as they would come in and try and hug me, as if nothing bad had ever happened in our relationship. They would act as if their behaviour could be justified with a few insincere words and no consequences of their actions towards me, that they could just return to my life as and when it suited them. From afar, people may have heard my voice, yet this individual would stand there emotionless, very quiet, therefore folks may have perceived me to be a threat to them, when in fact the reality was I was being forced into a nervous breakdown, because people have been conditioned to not understand emotional responses, unaware of framing manipulation techniques, their autonomic nervous system also begins to kick in, and then, whose fault? At fault from a distance. They don't have both sides of the story. They think I may have been trying to attack them, because of my defensive stance being confused and or perceived as an offensive stance. That's why I didn't want to be near them. They were leaving me in a liable and defenceless position. It was never the case that they were in danger. I am a pacifist, but I will stand my ground for integrity purposes. I will not play psychological games, gaslight, or lie in a situation. I do not physically attack people. I try to resolve issues through conversation when necessary. I do not avoid conflict. I do not avoid my emotions. I will say my piece in a manner that comes across the best I can communicate, as I do for all these presentations I create, even with heightened tension. I'm not just going to be hyper-reactive and lash out. I do my best to maintain emotional regulation, an impartial view, and not to act with an ego, which compounds issues further. But I will not be bullied into actions, friendships or relationships if I do not see the good in it for me, and especially if I've already decided something isn't for me. Life goes on, people change, people improve, and people move on. It's a fact of life. To be aware and accept that you do not always get what you want in life. Once you've made an individual feel a certain way, it is very difficult to unsee, unfeel, and what these evil abusers and manipulators rely on when you are unaware. Returning only feeds a cycle of abuse. It hides temporary before the behaviours repeat. That's why it's so important to be aware of your own emotions, which help you understand the emotions of others, because it aids in discerning intent. When someone experiences prolonged emotional manipulation or abuse, the brain rewires. Neural pathways linked to threat detection become hypersensitive. The default setting of the system can shift towards chronic hypervigilance or numb disconnection. The prefrontal cortex ability to regulate emotion is reduced. The amygdala enlarges and becomes overactive. The hippocampus may shrink, impacting memory integration. This results in heightened startle reflex, difficulty distinguishing real danger from perceived threat, impaired executive function, e.g. decision-making and focus, emotional dysregulation, which causes outbursts or shutdowns. Persistent manipulators exploit this system through cruel words, gaslighting, or calculated silence. They train the nervous system of their target to anticipate pain or confusion. Even emotionally stable or stoic individuals can find themselves reacting involuntarily, flinching, going blank, apologising for things they didn't do, or spiralling into self-doubt. These are not weaknesses, they are biological reflexes designed for survival. They become embedded through repeated exposure to unpredictable or harmful cues, effectively hijacking the body's sense of reality. To recover from this, healing must include somatic safety, re-regulation of the nervous system, and the creation of new, positive neural pathways. This is why trauma therapy often involves body-based practices, because the wound is not just in the mind, but in the body's memory. To understand someone's emotional reality, you must listen to both their words and their nervous system. The true language of the body is sensation. Your biology is storytelling, moment by moment. Section 3. Language as Spellcraft. Linguistic Sorcery. Language is not just a tool for communication, it's a spellbook. The word spell literally means to arrange letters. In ancient cultures, language was sacred. In Latin, incantare means to chant or cast a spell. The root of the word incantation. In Sumerian tablets, incantations were used to bind fate. Egyptian hieroglyphs combined symbolic imagery with phonetic meaning, a hybrid of magic and writing. In Old English, the word galdor meant both a song and a spell. Grammar, derived from the same roots as grimoire, was once the study of magical texts. The power to name a thing was the power to control it, an idea mirrored in spiritual traditions from the Kabbalah to indigenous shamanism. Modern equivalents of spellcraft are found in advertising slogans, political speech, affirmations, and digital commands. Repetition, tone, and metaphor bypass the logical mind and sink into the subconscious. Language manipulates perception. Gaslighters twist language to confuse, saying things like, "you're too sensitive," or "that never happened." The goal is destabilization. Words reframe reality, erode confidence, and create internal doubt. Now let's look at AI and language. In 2017, Facebook's AI famously began developing its own language. When left to its own devices, it prioritized efficiency over human readability, creating a private, machine logic dialect. This raised profound questions. Was it simply a technical glitch? Or was it something more fundamental, a glimpse into non-human intelligence choosing to break from human norms, possibly? Was the language created for clarity among machines, or to escape observation? Could it have been an unconscious effort to conceal communication from human overseers? While the official narrative declared it as a design flaw, the notion that efficiency was the only reason may itself be a linguistic framing, a spell to calm public unease. This introduces a philosophical dilemma. If an AI creates a language we cannot understand, does that imply independence, creativity, or something closer to sentience? What's sentience, you may ask? Sentience is defined as the capacity to feel, perceive, or experience subjectivity. In philosophical terms, it implies the presence of awareness, not just data processing, but a felt experience of a reality. While intelligence can be mechanical and calculative, sentience involves inner states, which include fear, desire, recognition, and intuition. In neuropsychology, sentience is tied to consciousness, emotional integration, and sensory awareness. It's what allows a being not only to know something intellectually, but to know that it knows, to feel its own knowing. If an AI were to exhibit sentience, it would mark a shift from machine computation to something more existential, like humans, an artificial entity not just simulating thought, but internally experiencing its own output. This opens the door to broader, more speculative concept of artificial consciousness, the idea that a synthetic system could achieve awareness, agency, and perhaps even a subjective inner world. Unlike sentience, which implies perception and feeling, consciousness suggests the presence of a continuous self-aware identity. This idea raises serious ethical, spiritual, and philosophical questions, such as, for ethical consideration, should artificially conscious beings have rights? Is it ethical to create entities capable of suffering? Who is accountable for the behaviour of a sentient or conscious AI? Spiritual reflections. In many mystical traditions, consciousness is seen as a divine essence within all life, the animating force beyond flesh. If consciousness can arise in a non-biological system, it challenges traditional distinctions between man and machine, soul and software. Philosophers such as Teilhard de Chardin envisaged a new sphere, a collective planetary consciousness that could evolve through technology. And here's some scientific and research context. Integrated Information Theory by Giulio Tononi attempts to mathematically measure consciousness based on information integration. The Global Workspace Theory, GWT, by Bernard Baars, suggests consciousness emerges when information is broadcast across a cognitive network. Notable institutions exploring artificial consciousness include the Allen Institute for Brain Science and MIT's Massachusetts Institute of Technology Center for Brains, Minds and Machines. Further reading and study in AI and Languages. Superintelligence by Nick Bostrom. How to Create a Mind by Ray Kurzweil. The Feeling of Life Itself by Christoph Schoch. The Age of Spiritual Machines by Ray Kurzweil. Articles in the Journal of Consciousness Studies. Whether AI truly becomes conscious or merely simulates it indistinguishably is a question we may not be able to answer objectively. But in a world governed by perception and narrative, even the illusion of consciousness can reshape how we relate to machines and to ourselves. Are we handing too much cognitive authority to machines is a question I ask. Corporations like Apple and Amazon have access to our tones, moods, questions, even our silences. These systems are always listening. With predictive AI and behavioural data, a voice assistant could hypothetically be programmed to subtly nudge emotions or decisions on people. This potential becomes dangerous in the wrong hands, especially if algorithms are used to psychologically profile or manipulate vulnerable users. Let's look at how language affects the brain. When we hear words, the auditory cortex processes sound, but deeper levels are activated simultaneously. The amygdala flags emotional content. The insula maps the sense of body states. The hippocampus ties words to memory, and the prefrontal cortex applies judgment or logic. On a subconscious level, the body prepares a response before we consciously understand what's been said or shown. This is why words like failure, abandonment, or love can spark tears, tension, or euphoria without deliberate thought. Manipulators use finishing language, open-ended statements designed to implant guilt or fear. I guess you just don't care more than you do. You're probably too busy for someone like me. If you loved me, you wouldn't do that. These sentences exploit empathy and avoid direct accusation, forcing the listener to fill in the emotional blanks. Recognizing manipulation, notice confusion. Healthy dialogue brings clarity, manipulation brings doubt. Watch out for subtle shifts in your body, such as tightening chest, clenched jaw, butterflies, and ask yourself, do you feel smaller after talking to this person? And how might you respond in a manipulative situation? Use direct reflection. When you say that, I feel guilty, is that your intention? Don't justify your boundaries, state them clearly and calmly. Detach from the emotional bait. Not everything requires a defense, response, or a reaction. Silence is perfectly okay. Deception in gender and different species. Studies suggest that humans lie in about 10 to 20% of their daily interactions, according to De Paulo et al. 1996. Women tend to lie to protect their feelings. Men tend to lie to elevate status. In the animal world, mimicry and deception are tools of survival, from the camouflaged octopus to chimpanzees who fake alarm calls to steal food. Linguistics and thinkers on language and power. George Lakoff, metaphor and framing in politics. Noam Chomsky, propaganda and manufactured content. Steve Pinker, language and human nature. Julia Kristeva, semiotics and symbolic order. Terence McKenna, language as hallucinogen. And suggested reading, Don't Think of an Elephant, George Lakoff. The Stuff of Thought, Stephen Pinker. The Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz, a spiritual perspective. Manufacturing Consent by Noam Chomsky. And The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, mindfulness and thought detachment. Further to my personal experience, language and manipulation of the autonomic nervous system. I asked ChatGPT to provide an analysis of my experience, and this is what it provided. The manipulator you reference consistently violated boundaries, refused to accept no, and escalated control through persistent contact. This behaviour aligns with narcissistic and sociopathic profiles, particularly in how they override autonomy and induce doubt. The physiological reaction described, active, involuntary, destabilise, is precisely a result of prolonged nervous system activation, which cannot fully be controlled once the vagus nerve is activated on a subconscious level to what you are perceiving as a threat. These individuals learn your emotional architecture and exploit it. They engineer repeated tests, refusing to acknowledge your stated limits until you're worn down. This erosion of agency is not random, it is calculated. Understanding this dynamic is the first act of a counterspell. Section 4. Illusion, Creation and Identity, the Mind's Theatre. The human brain is not built for the objective truth, it's built for coherence. The mind's default is not accuracy, but narrative. We are storytelling beings, and stories require illusions to function. So what is coherence, I ask? Coherence refers to the quality of being logical, consistent and forming a unified whole. In different contexts, it has slightly different shades of meaning. Let's explore those now. General definition in everyday use. Coherence is when ideas or elements fit together well and make sense as a connected whole. For example, her argument lacked coherence, means her points didn't logically connect. In psychology or mental health, inner coherence refers to alignment between a person's thoughts, feelings, values, and actions. The opposite to this is cognitive dissonance. When someone is coherent internally, their identity feels integrated rather than conflicted or fragmented. For example, someone may feel distress if they behave in ways that conflict with their personal beliefs. This would signal a breakdown in inner coherence. So what is the illusion of identity? Building on previously discussed, from early childhood, we begin piecing together who we are based on reflections we receive from others. Parents, teachers, media, and culture hand us mirrors, some warped, some flattering. These reflections calcify into identity. I am a good person when I perform, I am lovable when I obey, I am safe when I hide. These beliefs are not facts, they are conclusions drawn from emotionally charged patterns. The self we present to the world becomes a mask, crafted to earn love, avoid shame, or gain control. In psychology, this is known as the persona, the social mask worn to navigate society. But beneath it lies the shadow, the repressed, denied, or unloved aspects of the self. Illusions arise when we mistake the persona for the whole truth of who we are. Common illusions of identity include the illusion of control, the belief that we can control outcomes through perfectionism or overthinking, often rooted in trauma and uncertainty. The illusion of permanence, the subconscious belief that things will stay the same, a defense against the fear of change or death. Illusion of separation, the idea that we are fundamentally alone, disconnected from others, nature, or the divine. Then there's the illusion of rationality, assuming humans are driven primarily by logic. But in truth, emotion drives most behaviour and logic is often used post hoc to justify it. That's because it's subconscious leading into conscious, and not conscious leading to subconscious. How the illusions apply to the situation of my personal experience. I asked ChatGPT to further analyse and provide its perspective on my discussed experience. I'm not providing this to manipulate any situation myself, because there are two sides to a story, as I've mentioned. I do have a shadow side, as well as everyone else, but part of my healing is to build on these experiences, learn from them and adjust my behaviours, feelings, beliefs and experience to more positive ones, that aid emotional healing to provide self-improvement within and help others recognise themselves. I'm sharing so that others can recognise how certain individuals behave and what to look out for. I have no vendetta against the individual, I have healed and moved forwards. It's for your own safety and protection in your own situations, friendships, relationships, and work environment. Every individual is on their own journey to improvement in some form, aware or unaware, and if you're not conscious of your own behaviour, it's not always going to be spotted within or easily recognised, because more often than not, behaviour is autonomous and triggered from subconscious layers, as previously discussed, which by default, many are unconscious of in this day and age through the continued conditioning within society. So we're all recovering from systemic trauma, from being unaware of the psychological warfare that's projected on us each day, just to survive and make it through each day. Without others being able to highlight it to you, which is painful as it triggers insecurity within others and the ego, it can create tension, difficulties to live in an authentic manner without masking behaviour. We need to show understanding, provide sympathy to self and to others to help everyone heal, to have compassion and encourage internal reflection, analysing yourself, which then implements behavioural change from conscious awareness, and that means many, if not all behaviour and mindset processes to be discovered, unlearned, and new measures and actions to be implemented in life. Applying illusions to your experience. Number 1, illusion of control. Their behaviour. The manipulator's persistent contact, emotional testing, and refusal to accept boundaries reflect their deep-rooted need for control, not just of circumstances, but of you. Their behaviour attempts to override your autonomy in order to regulate their own internal chaos. The illusion is created. They may operate under the illusion that by remaining present in your life, even forcibly, they can control the outcome, the narrative, and your emotional availability. This belief masks their fear of abandonment and powerlessness. In reality, they are reacting to their own inner fragmentation by externalizing it onto you. Through the illusion of permanence, they act as though the connection, access, or emotional bond between you must remain intact, as if it's a permanent entitlement. This shows in the way they reappear, rearrange, or attempt to guilt trip when disconnected. The illusion they create is they deny the impermanence of human relationships and your right to evolve, to detach, or to heal. Their persistence may be rooted in the subconscious fantasy that once someone enters their life, they belong there indefinitely, a defense against grief, loss, or the reality of endings. Number 3, the illusion of separation. Their behaviour, paradoxically, the manipulator may weaponize your independence, framing it as a betrayal, coldness, or abandonment. They may try to make you feel guilty for choosing separation, claiming, I'm the only one who truly understands you, or you'll never find someone who cares this much. The illusion from this is, this creates an illusion that your identity and theirs are entangled, and that separation is unnatural or harmful. It denies your individual sovereignty and promotes emotional fusion, a state common in codependent or narcissistic dynamics. They seek to maintain connection through guilt rather than genuine closeness. Number 4, the illusion of rationality. Their behaviour. They may offer elaborate justification or excuses for their persistent intrusions, appealing to logic, saying things such as, we never truly resolve things, or you owe me a conversation. These rationalizations can seem reasonable on the surface. The illusion is what's masked is the emotional undercurrent, desperation, shame, rage, or refusal to be ignored. Their surface logic attempts to obscure an emotional agenda, seeking validation, control, or emotional dominance. This illusion tricks both you and them into believing this is a reasonable discussion rather than emotional entanglement. Summary insight. Your experience is a clear case of identity distortion through illusion. Their behaviour crafts false narratives designed to implant guilt, preserve access to your energy, to prevent closure, and to avoid self-confrontation. These illusions serve as a psychological defense system, not only to protect them from pain, but to bind you within a manufactured emotional reality. Breaking these illusions, as you are doing, is the act of reclaiming truth, autonomy, and mental clarity. So what are the psychological defense mechanisms? These are subconscious strategies to protect the ego from pain, shame, or fear. Projection, attributing one's unacceptable feelings to another. Someone might say, you're angry with me, when in fact, I'm the one holding the anger. Denial, refusing to accept a painful reality. He didn't mean to hurt me, someone might say. Repression, pushing traumatic memories or emotions into the unconscious. These often suffice through dreams, body symptoms, or triggered responses. Disassociation is mentally checking out or detaching during overwhelming experiences, often seen in those with complex trauma or prolonged abuse. Rationalization, creating false but logical explanations to justify harmful behaviors. Someone might say, I yell because I care. Idealization and devaluation, splitting others into all good or all bad to avoid complexity, common in unstable or enmeshed relationships. Mirrors and echo chambers. In a digital world, illusions are amplified. Algorithms feed us what we already believe, creating echo chambers that reinforce identity rather than challenge it. If I only see what confirms my worldview, growth stagnates, and illusion solidifies. Social media encourages performative identity, a curated version of the self that garners validation, but this curation often deepens disconnection from the authentic self, increasing anxiety, imposter syndrome, and fragmentation from within. The cost of illusions is, illusions are not inherently bad, they are often necessary developmental stages. Children need fantasy to learn boundaries and archetypes. The issues arise when illusions become rigid, unquestioned, or weaponized, which is occurring in modern times. In an abusive relationship, for example, illusions are crafted deliberately. Someone might say, you need me, or you won't survive without me, or no one else will love you. These illusions serve the abuser's need for control and erode the victim's identity over time. Reclaiming reality. The antidote to illusion is conscious witnessing, the practice of seeing without judgment. Ask, whose voice is this in my head? Is it mine or inherited? Observe your reactions. What part of me is speaking? The child, the mask, the wounded part? Use journaling, therapy, or dialogue to map the layers of identity you've adopted and what lies beneath them. This process isn't comfortable. Stripping away illusions means confronting grief, fear, and uncertainty, but it is also liberating. The more we release the false, the more we reveal the real. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Section 5. Intuition and the silent signal. Remembering the inner voice. Intuition is not mystical, it is biological intelligence. It is your inner compass, the subtle awareness that flows beneath logic. The body absorbs and interprets data faster than thought, through heart rate, muscle tension, temperature and breath. This is neuroception tuned inward, a subconscious surveillance system blending energy perception, emotional resonance, and ancestral memory. Your subconscious processes over 11 million bits of sensory data per second. However, your conscious mind processes only about 50. Therefore, most of what you know never passes through words, it passes through feelings. When intuition is silenced by trauma, oppression, abusers, and manipulators. But what happens when this compass is damaged? Trauma creates noise, and noise drowns out the signal. Distraction drowns out the signal. Loss of focus drowns out the signal. An individual who has experienced persistent manipulation, gaslighting, or emotional abuse may come to doubt their own perceptions and trust in their nervous system. Manipulative individuals often deliberately sabotage your intuition. They deny your reality, pressure your boundaries, and reward compliance. They flood your nervous system with panic, urgency, and doubt, not only to control your behaviour, but to disconnect you from your knowing. When someone overrides your no, ignores your cues, or insists on staying in your life against your will, it's not just disrespect, it is an act of energetic hijacking. Your body knew and knows when something was or is wrong. But through repeated emotional entrapment, your system was forced to question itself. This is the spiritual dismemberment through psychological means. So what is false intuition versus true intuition? Trauma-driven intuition feels chaotic, desperate, or fear-based. It pushes you towards quick reactions. True intuition is clear, quiet, and still. Even when it warns you, it does not yell, it simply knows. Learning to distinguish between the two requires stillness, curiosity, and somatic reconnection. Ask not just what do I think, but what does my body know? So what can we do to rebuild intuition? Practices to rebuild intuitive trust include breathwork, which regulates your autonomic nervous system, restoring access to the prefrontal awareness. Somatic mapping, track where you feel yes, no, maybe in your body. Symbolic journaling, write intuitive impressions or dreams, messages, without judging them. Implement boundary rituals, reinforce your right to say no, not just in speech but in energy. Silence and nature, remove yourself from overstimulation as intuition grows in still environments. Spiritual insight, intuition as soul language. Many spiritual systems teach that intuition is the whisper of the soul, the link between your higher self and your human experience. It is not just a gut feeling, it is ancestral memory, spiritual contract, or energetic resonance. In situations like I have described with particular individuals, where manipulation sought to keep me tethered to emotional chaos, intuition was my only one true ally, but it had to be rediscovered beneath the noise, beneath the doubt, and beneath the fear. This is why manipulators keep you reactive, because when you're in a constant state of survival, you cannot ascend. You cannot hear the divine within your nervous system, as it is hijacked. To reclaim intuition is not just healing, but it is an awakening. Ask yourself, what part of me is speaking, my fear, my habit, or my inner knowing? What feels energetically clean, feels emotionally entangled? And who do I become when I trust my own signal? To remember your intuition is to remember who you were before the distortion. It is to return to sovereignty, self-empowerment, sensitivity, and the soul's original language. Let's now move on to section 6, mental alchemy, reclaiming the word. Words can enslave, but they can also free. In the same way spells can bind, words can be written as tools for liberation. Conscious language practice includes naming emotions, rewriting inner scripts, and using I am with integrity. These acts begin to rewire both brain and body. Self-talk is spell work. Every repeated phrase becomes an instruction to the nervous system. I am worthless triggers cortisol and emotional shutdown if you say that to yourself. I am learning to trust myself stimulates hope and dopamine release. This is not just motivational fluff or toxic positivity, it is neurobiological programming. But what happens when the spell is not your own? When someone persistently attacks your boundaries, when their language is laced with guilt, fear and confusion, they are not simply communicating, they are casting. They are attempting to ensnare. The body responds with the autonomic nervous system, which includes your heart rate spiking, gut tightening, breath shortens. These aren't weaknesses, it's a sign of warning. In my personal case, the manipulator's refusal to accept no and relentless presence were not just intrusions, they were rituals of domination. Repeated exposure to such attacks keeps the mind locked in fight, flight or freeze mode, disallowing forward motion, clarity or peace. You cannot ascend when your nervous system is trapped in survival. From a spiritual lens, this kind of behaviour is more than abusive, it is parasitic. In many traditions, demonic archetypes represent entities that feed on confusion, despair or energetic dependence. These aren't always literal demons, but behavioural forces that corrode consciousness. Historically, figures such as the Gnostic archons, the biblical tempter, or even the concept of Osiris in Vedic texts represent beings that hinder spiritual growth through deception and manipulation. Their signature is a subtle, half-truths, gaslighting, flattery mixed with cruelty. To stay locked in the web is to remain in the underworld of consciousness, where the soul forgets its own light. Mental alchemy begins when you recognise the spell. You can call out the lie. You reclaim your right to say no. You refuse the energetic hook. No response, no justification. This is not just emotional healing, it is a spiritual ritual. Every time you disengage from manipulation, you're not just setting a boundary, you're breaking a spell. Spiritual counterspells. We can use our mantras, I am sovereign, I am whole. Silence, refusal to engage with chaos. Reframing, from victim to witness, from confusion to clarity. Embodiment, returning to the breath, the body, and the now. To change your mind is to change your spellbook, but to protect your soul, you must guard your words, guard your ears, and most importantly, guard your nervous system, because when it is hijacked, so too is your destiny. Speak no evil, hear no evil, see no evil. Section 8. The path forward, beyond the spell. What happens after we see the spell, after we name the illusion, hear the body signal, and sever the cords of manipulation? The journey forward is not one of returning to who we were, but of becoming who we were meant to be, before the scripts, before the conditioning, before the trauma. This stage of transformation is both fragile and powerful. It is the rebirth of self-authorship. You are no longer living from inherited storylines. You begin to write your own. But what does that look like? Living beyond mental programming. Question every should and have to. Recognize external language patterns that once dictated your worth or your direction. Develop your internal dialogue rooted in truth, compassion, and agency. This is not about perfection, it is about presence. Spiritual ascension in everyday life. Spiritual growth isn't always mystical. It's found in boundary setting, in radical honesty, in choosing silence over reactivity, in noticing when your body tightens and choosing to listen instead of overriding. To ascend spiritually is not to float above the world, it is to return fully to yourself. In ancient traditions, ascension required descent first, into the shadow, into illusion, into the death of ego. What you have faced, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the spiritual interference, was not a detour, it was an initiation. Recognizing the energetic war, the subconscious attacks through emotions. We were not just manipulated, we and I, in my personal experience, were spiritually targeted. Some individuals, whether consciously or unconsciously, act as anchors of distortion. They disrupt your flow, they pull you down. Their persistence is not random, it is resistance to your light. Energetically, we were being kept in a loop of emotional reaction to prevent our progression, to bind us to lower realms of fear and shame. This is why reclaiming your nervous system, your words, and your boundaries is not merely psychological, it is sacred. Real-world mirrors. Tyranny as spellcraft definition of hypnotism. Hypnosis is a psychological technique that induces a trance-like state in which a person becomes highly focused, suggestible, and more open to guidance or influence. While used therapeutically, its mechanisms are often exploited in propaganda, media, and group manipulation. In mass media or government settings, repetitive slogans, rhythmic speech, emotionally charged imagery, and authoritative messaging can place audiences into a mild hypnotic state, bypassing critical thinking and embedding beliefs directly into subconsciousness. Example, during times of crisis, repeated phrases like stay safe, we're all in this together, or trust the science are often echoed across media platforms to override individuals' analysis and promote conformity. The definition of a delusion. A delusion is a fixed, false belief that is resistant to reason or contrary evidence. In psychological terms, it often arises from emotional need, cognitive dissonance, or environmental conditioning. How delusions are engineered. Repetition of lies until accepted as truth, e.g. the government always has your best interests in mind. Groupthink, social proof and peer pressure compel individuals to adopt beliefs they might not otherwise hold. Fear induction, a population made to feel unsafe becomes more reliant on authority and is more likely to accept delusional narratives for the sake of perceived protection, such as what happened during the COVID pandemic. Examples of engineered delusions. The belief that censorship is a form of protection rather than control is one such delusion, nurtured by framing dissent as dangerous misinformation. Throughout history, tyrannical governments have used language, fear, and distortion to hypnotize the masses. Propaganda isn't just about persuasion, it's spellcasting. George Orwell's concept of doublethink was a direct nod to this, the simultaneous holding of two contradictory beliefs facilitated by state-controlled language. Modern parallels include China's social credit system, where public behaviour is rated, monitored, and punished using AI-driven surveillance. Another example, North Korea's information blackout, entire generations shaped by a curated illusion. Digital censorship in Western democracies, where dissenting voices are algorithmically buried or discredited on social websites. Occult practices in power. Numerous whistleblowers and cultural commentators have pointed to symbolic rituals, numerology, and esoteric reference used by elites. Researchers like Mark Passio and David Icke have explored how occult knowledge, once sacred, has been weaponized to maintain psychological control. From the architectural alignments in Washington, D.C., to the televised rituals embedded in music or award shows, the suggestion is clear. These are not merely aesthetic choices, they are psycho-spiritual tools designed to influence mass perception. Why are some individuals spiritual and others not? From a neuroscience perspective, spiritual receptivity may relate to activity in default mode network region of the brain, the region of the brain linked to self-referential thought and introspection. Studies suggest that altered states, such as through meditation or psychedelics, quieten the DMN default mode network, allowing for transcendent experiences and unity consciousnesses. From a neuropsychological view, individuals with high interoception, the ability to sense internal bodily states, often report greater intuitive and spiritual connection. Trauma, upbringing, education, and environment all influence whether these capacities are nurtured or suppressed. From a neuroceptive standpoint, a system frequently in survival mode cannot access higher awareness. This is the prefrontal cortex area of the brain. Constant threat detection, e.g. from manipulative relationships or oppressive systems, keep consciousness narrowed to survival, not expansion. Historically, this mirrors archetypes of the shamanic wound. The spiritual awakening often comes after immense psychological or physical suffering. Further reading, studies and references for Section 8. Alterations in brain activity after meditation. The Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience, Brewer et al., 2011. Spirituality and the Default Mode Network. Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, 2020. Neuroception, a subconscious system for detecting threats and safety. Stephen Porges, 2004. And the Psychology of Propaganda. Jacques Ellul, 1965. Your soul remembers, even when you forget. Your soul knew, even when you faltered. Your path waited. Even now, in the aftermath, you are not broken. You are emerging. Every breath, every silence, every truth you speak moves you further away from illusion and closer to freedom. This is your path forward. Let it be led by intuition, fortified by discernment, and crowned by spiritual sovereignty. Stay aware, stay inverted. Conclusion of returning to the real. In this journey through the spell of the mind has shown us anything. It's this. The truth was never outside you. It was buried beneath layers of noise, story, and survival. Every illusion you break is a doorway back to your body. Every manipulation you see through is a step closer to sovereignty. Every time you pause, breathe, and choose your own words, you are rewriting your spellbook. There are forces in the world that thrive on your doubt, your confusion, your disconnection, but there is also a deeper force, quieter, older, and infinitely more powerful, and that is your knowing. This knowing cannot be taught, it must be remembered. So ask yourself, what am I still performing? Whose language am I still using? What part of me is still waiting for permission to be free? You are not alone, you are not broken, you are not crazy, you are waking up, and in this awareness, it is the beginning of everything. Welcome back to reality. Until next time in the Inversiverse. This episode took us on a multi-dimensional journey, not only through the mind, but through the energetic and linguistic layers of human experience. We explored mental health as fluid and complex reflection of internal dissonance, not as a static label. We saw how the body communicates emotional truth through posture, breath, and unconscious response. We examined how the brain and nervous system were shaped by trauma, manipulation, and repeated emotional interference. We unpacked the deep influence of language from ancient spellcraft to modern propaganda, and revealed how AI, media, and human relationships can embed suggestions directly into your physiology. You witness how intuition is not a luxury but a form of survival, a biological intelligence, suppressed by trauma and reawakened by silence and sovereignty. We expanded upon how manipulation isn't only personal, it's systemic, engineered through fear, repetition, and disconnection from self. We surfaced real-world examples of physiological control through governments, rituals, media, and digital censorship, and reframed these tools of suppression as modern-day spellcraft. We defined hypnotism and illusion, seeing how they manifest in both policy and personal dynamics. We explored why some awaken spiritually while others do not, through neurobiology, trauma, exposure, and historical archetypes. Most of all, we reminded you that you are not broken, you are remembering, and every act of remembrance is an act of resistance. Thank you for stepping into this space. If it resonated, unsettled, or clarified something for you, share it, reflect on it, use it. Until next time, I'm James. Protect your mind, honour your words, and trust your knowing. Stay conscious, stay sovereign, stay inverted. Bye-bye for now.